Yo, what's up guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. Tensura. Melting the Eternal Frost by JackDaWeb Chapter 17 Founding Festival Part 3. Rimmeru's Pav. I opened my eyes and saw the early morning rays lighting up my room. Yawn. Looks like it's time for the big day. Sitting up from my bed, I felt rejuvenated and ready for the grand opening of what I consider the greatest project in Tempest. While I don't need coffee or anything, it's become a hobby for Velzard and I to drink it first thing in the morning. I pulled out 2 mugs of hot and iced coffee from my imaginary space, made to our liking. Yawn. Good morning, Rimu-kun. Velzard greeted me as she sat up from bed while rubbing her eyes. Good morning, Vels-chan. Here ya go. I greeted her while handing her the mug, which she gratefully accepted. I took a sip from my coffee, and while it did nothing for me, the taste was superb. That's basically the reason we drink it, it tastes good. Looks like today will finally be the reveal of the grand project you 3 have been working on, she remarked before taking a sip from her mug, and I nodded excitedly in response. Yup. I'm super excited. We've done countless tests to make sure everything works as intended, especially the resurrection bracelet. Each floor has been fine-tuned so that the difficulty doesn't spike too drastically. As for the other non-dungeon related features, those will be kept a secret from the public, I explained passionately. I thought the dungeon only served as an attraction for adventurers. What other uses does it serve? She asked curiously. There are various facilities on the 100th floor of the dungeon. For one, there are several laboratories meant for testing different projects, and Veldora's private room will also be on this floor, meaning he'll permanently move out of this house. I enumerated briefly and paused to see her reaction. She had a look of surprise on her face, but it quickly disappeared as a cheeky grin replaced her shocked expression. Foo. It's quite a shame to no longer have Veldora-kun around here. However, that means we can finally make use of the hot spring in this house without worrying about my little brother walking in on us, she stated smugly while looking right into my eyes. Oh shit. Why is that the first thing on your mind? I questioned sheepishly and was met by her seductive and hungry gaze. She then placed her mug on the nightstand before swiftly positioning herself on top of me. Because, Rimu-kun, it's been quite a while since we've gotten to relax together, and I've very been eager to do just that, she answered in a very provocative tone as she drew her face closer to mine. The succubus dragon has fucking awoken. Wait. Why, you're right. Now that Veldora has moved out of the house, we can use the hot spring here just like you've always wanted to, I replied timidly as I gently put my hands on her shoulders. Thankfully, this was enough to please her and she promptly got off me. Phew. Foo. I'll make sure you keep that promise, Rimu-kun, she declared with a satisfied grin on her face. Sigh. I should really seal the deal with her sooner rather than later. Yeah. Come on, let's get ready for today, I urged dryly as I stood up from the bed and quickly got changed into my Demon Lord outfit. She did the same and changed into an attire I'd never seen her in before. Velzard was now wearing a white and blue kimono with a yellow obi. The kimono was decorated with blue snowflakes, which emphasized her frosty nature. She still wore her usual yellow headband, but her hair was now tied in a ponytail instead of a twin tail. Safe to say she looked incredibly beautiful and the new fit really suited her. That kimono looks beautiful on you, Vels-chan, I complimented earnestly while admiring her new look. Foo. Thank you, Rimu-kun. Shuna-chan helped me design this and it came out incredible if I do say so myself, she said proudly. Well then, I suppose it's time we head out, I said enthusiastically, and she nodded with a smile in agreement. We teleported to the lobby where the guests would soon arrive. Looking around, it seems like we're the first ones to have arrived here. Being early is better than being late anyway. Velzard and I sat down on the couch after realizing that it would still be some time before anyone showed up. While sitting down and maintaining my excitement for the grand opening of the dungeon, Velzard suddenly laid her head on my shoulder. She didn't say a word and had a smile of contentment on her face. I was a bit surprised, to say the least. But I didn't dislike it, so I stayed silent and relaxed my mind and body. This is nice. We remained in this position for a few minutes completely undisturbed and in silence. Surprisingly, it wasn't awkward at all and was actually rather pleasant. I loved the peaceful vibe and atmosphere between us. However, that peace would soon come to an abrupt end as we felt a distortion in space-time a few meters behind the couch. We looked behind to see that Veldora had just teleported inside the lobby with an excited look on his face. Kuahahahahaha. Rimuru, today is the big day. I sure hope you're. Veldora stopped mid-sentence and seemed rather apprehensive, which made Velzard giggle in response. I was a bit confused as to why he suddenly looked at us awkwardly. Did I stumble onto something I wasn't meant to? He asked somewhat anxiously. What is he talking about? Foo. Not at all, Veldora-kun. Come sit with us. Velzard urged politely, but Veldora looked a bit hesitant. Eventually, he obliged and started walking towards us while for some reason trying his best not to look in our direction. His behavior really confused me at first. Suddenly, I felt a soft sensation all over my arm. I looked to my right and saw that Velzard was clinging to it rather tightly. What? Had she been holding on to my arm the whole time? How did I not notice it at all? Crap. Now I see why Veldora looked at us so awkwardly. His sister had been clinging to me so affectionately. It appears that you were so engrossed and carefree sitting next to Velzard that you failed to notice her actions, Rimuru-sama. Like hell that's the case. I couldn't have been that comfortable, right? According to Rimuru-sama's thoughts not 2 minutes ago, he said he found the experience rather pleasant. Quit reading my mind all the time, foo. There's no need for me to read your mind, Rimuru-sama. I'm part of you, after all. I really should control my thoughts better. Then again, Seal could most definitely see through that, so it's more or less pointless. Sigh, the mind of Amana's is truly terrifying. I'm not certain of it, but I have a feeling that she's been experimenting with my skills in the background. I'll push that thought aside for now. Veldora took his seat on the couch ahead of us and still looked incredibly timid. After a few seconds, Velzard released my arm with a satisfied smile on her face, and Veldora was now able to look in our direction with less awkwardness. Geez, I'm 100% positive that this guy is starting to suspect things between me and his sister. Anyway, Veldora. You were saying? I urged him to continue his statement earlier. He shifted his position on the couch to a more comfortable one and regained his composure. Yes. Ehem. I hope you're ready for the grand opening of the dungeon. After the event later, Ramirez and I have something to show you, he said excitedly, which piqued my interest. Ho? You guys made some more additions to the dungeon? I asked curiously, and he nodded with a grin. It's only one addition actually, but I'm sure it'll be something you'll greatly appreciate, he proclaimed cheerfully. Now I'm even more intrigued. Really? Care to reveal what it is? I asked in excitement. Kuahahahahaha. You'll have to wait until the end of the day, Rimuru, he replied firmly, much to my letdown. That's a bummer, but I guess I can wait. It better be worth it though, I said with a grin. Once our brief conversation had ended, Veldora pulled out a manga and started reading it. Velzard once again laid her head on my shoulder as we waited for the guests to arrive. Wanting to pass the time, Velzard and I decided to also read a manga. The series that has caught her attention as of late is Oshi no Ko, an idle manga mixed with a detective story. We read through half of a volume until some new arrivals had come to the lobby. The first to show up were a few of my executives who'll be accompanying us during the opening event. After a few minutes, Luminous and her subordinates joined us, already looking prepared with stunning and formal outfits. The vampire queen looked a bit ticked off for a moment to see Veldora, but quickly hid her emotions. She was still posing as a maid of Louis Valentine so that her identity remained hidden from the unaware guests. Not long after, the other guests had finally arrived. Veldora, Velzard, and I all stood up and gathered in the middle of the large group. We maintained an air of dignity and majesty while doing so, and with a clap, I got everyone's attention. The guests turned to face us with eager and excited looks. Good morning, everyone. It is now the second day of this celebration, and today we have something grand to show you all. I began my speech firmly and looked around at the guests, all with anticipating looks on their faces. That's right. This project is the brainchild of Ramirez, Rimuru, and myself, and has been in the works for nearly a month, Veldora continued proudly, and everyone was now. Without further ado, we present to you all. I cut myself off and clasped my hands together, which teleported all of us to the entrance of the dungeon. The Grand Dungeon of Tempest. I concluded my statement loudly as I proudly gestured to the large and beautifully designed entrance of the dungeon. The guests were momentarily stunned by the sudden warp, but that soon changed into awe and astonishment as they set their gaze upon the gigantic structure before them. They were completely amazed and had fully agape mouths while they stood before the enormous door leading to the first floor. They watched intently as the massive entrance slowly opened, revealing the interior of the dungeon's first floor. A few seconds later, the door had fully opened, and inside was a wide stairway that led down to the lobby. I walked towards the entrance and urged everyone to follow along. The walls were lined with torches powered by a constant magicule supply which kept the stairway dimly lit. It was only a short walk considering we made it to the bottom in a minute. Upon reaching the bottom of the steps, we entered a massive room with an area of 62,500 square meters. This was the first floor of the dungeon, which contained the lobby, front desk, and training area. The main purpose of this floor was to serve as the reception for the adventurers and provide a tutorial for the dungeon. In the lobby, several ginormous screens showed a live view of the various floors. "Welcome to the first floor of the dungeon," I announced loudly, and the guests looked all around in awe at the incredibly spacious yet well-decorated room. "Wait, first floor?" Gazel asked anxiously, and Veldora and I grinned in response. He, they're all in for a big surprise. Kuahahahahaha. That's right, this is the first out of 100 floors, Veldora stated firmly, which made the guests widen their eyes in shock. 100? They asked loudly in unison, and we nodded in affirmation. Velzard has simply been observing everything from the side with a gentle smile. And they're each this massive? Elmesia asked apprehensively. Not at all of them. The floors all vary in size and appearance, and each floor has been fully customized, so no two floors are the same, although some do look identical to one another. I explained in detail. Rimuru, I'm going to be checking through the levels of the dungeon to make sure everything is working properly. After that, I'll check in with the true mastermind and let her know that the dungeon is ready to receive its first challengers. Would it be fine if you carried on the tour without me? Veldora asked expectantly. Yeah, you go do that. I'll show the guests around the first floor and explain to them the mechanics of the dungeon. I replied cheerfully and held my fist out to him. Kuahahahahaha. As expected of my sworn brother, he responded loudly while giving me a fist bump before heading towards the stairway that leads to the next floor. Turning my attention back to the guests, I saw that the children looked a bit confused and intrigued. What did Veldora-sama mean by true mastermind, sensei? Alice asked curiously, and the other children eagerly looked at me for my reply. While Veldora and I did contribute a lot to the design and mechanisms of the whole dungeon, this whole place would not be possible without Ramirez. I answered honestly, and they widened their eyes in response. You mean the fairy that saved us? Kenya asked excitedly, and I nodded. So she's the mastermind of this whole project? Gale questioned further. Yup. It's thanks to her that the dungeon can become a reality in the first place, I said, and the children became starstruck. Amazing. The children exclaimed in unison. Looks like they really admire Ramirez, which makes sense considering she saved them from certain death. Third-person Pav Rimuru proceeded to explain the mechanics and features of the dungeon to the guests. He obviously kept several things a secret from the guests, such as the secret rooms that are located on the 100th floor. There were the features that he elaborated on. Starting with the overall concept, the dungeon is an entirely separate dimension from the outside world. This is possible thanks to Ramirez's intrinsic skill, Small World, which allows her to create a near-endless isolated space that can be altered to her liking. The entire project was created to serve as an attraction for adventurers, a place where they could hone their skills and obtain valuable treasures or rare equipment. The entire dungeon is powered and maintained by Veldora's constant stream of magicules, which he provides to Ramirez. It is also thanks to his supply that monsters of varying difficulty can spawn continuously. Starting from the lowest floor where the magicule concentration is highest, the most dangerous monsters spawn in numerous quantities on the levels directly above the 100th floor. The density of magicules gradually decreases as it trickles upwards, causing the quantity and danger level of monsters to lower. Up on the highest levels, only low-tier loot can be found and obtained, and the monsters consist of small fries that even beginners can easily deal with. Once you get past the early levels, things start to ramp up in difficulty as more dangerous monsters start appearing and deadly traps of different kinds begin emerging. In turn, the loot that can be found becomes more and more valuable and the equipment is also at a higher grade. This trend continues down until the lowest level of the dungeon. Every 5 floors, there is a monster-free zone where the adventurers can rest and safely keep track of their progress. To balance things and make them more interesting, every 10 floors, there is a guardian which must be defeated to advance to the next level. Floors 91 to 94 aren't necessarily part of the whole dungeon level system but are instead facilities that serve different functions. This part was only explained briefly and the specifics weren't mentioned since only Tempest citizens are privy to this knowledge. The 95th floor is lush with overgrown fauna and greenery and it is where tree ants and elves reside. This floor has the largest space in the entire dungeon, boasting an area of 25 kilometers squared. Located here is an inn where various commodities are offered at a significantly higher price than those on the surface and a shop where equipment can be bought, sold, or repaired. This floor can be accessed from any level with an entry fee of 3 silver coins. However, those who enter the floor in this manner are only granted limited access to the inn and equipment shop since it requires someone to legitimately reach this floor to have full access to all the facilities. The journey starts on the first floor, where there is a tutorial area of sorts that gives incoming challengers the basic information they need to traverse the levels of the dungeon. The fee to enter and participate in dungeon crawling is 3 silver coins. Every person who decides to brave the dungeon is given a resurrection bracelet which revives the wearer upon death and instantly transports them to the surface with all injuries being healed. This is to ensure that no adventurer truly dies in the dungeon while still making sure that it accurately simulates a classic RPG dungeon experience. There are 2 additional items that an adventurer can purchase to aid them in their journey. The first is the return whistle, which for 30 silver coins can be used to instantly teleport the user using it back to the surface. It is a single-use item and is limited to 1 person only. The next item is a recording crystal, which costs 1 gold coin and allows the user to create a save point where they will be brought to during their next dungeon crawl. It too is a one-time use item and must be purchased again after usage. Rimuru decided to leave out more specific details, namely the kinds of monsters that inhabit the floors, the guardian monsters, the kinds of traps, the loot and equipment that can be obtained, and the designs of each level. He decided that he'd tell Velzard the more secret features of the dungeon later that day since she was unaware of them. She was rather hands-off on the whole project and instead took over Rimuru's paperwork whenever he had to work on the dungeon. Rimuru's paw phew. That was quite a long-winded explanation. Fortunately, the guests didn't mind and were fully paying attention to everything I said. Safe to say that they were astonished by the level of intricacy and planning that went into this project. I couldn't be more proud of our team. Ramirez really came in super clutch for Tempest. My, this project is incredible. Elmisia praised honestly and the guests all nodded in agreement. While I do feel a bit uneasy that this whole place is essentially powered by the Storm Dragon, I also can't help but marvel at the sheer scale and design complexity of this labyrinth. Lewis followed up earnestly, which made Velzard and I chuckle slightly at the mention of Veldora. This guy really was a massive troublemaker in the past, huh? Foo. You don't have to worry about my little brother, Lewis-san. He's long since abandoned his ways of causing chaos and needless mass destruction. Rimu-kun and I are here to keep him in check as well. Velzard reassured in a light-hearted manner and this put a look of relief on everyone present, especially Luminous. Sensei, will we get to see a live demonstration of the dungeon? Alice asked eagerly. Yup. There are many adventurers visiting Tempest right now because of the founding festival. Now that the dungeon has officially opened, there will be an influx of new challengers wanting to give it a try. Ramirez is also currently announcing and promoting the grand opening of the dungeon, so there's that. I answered in confirmation, much to the children's thrill. Awesome. I can't wait to see how everything works. I bet there are some super tough monsters in there, Kenya exclaimed in excitement. I turned my attention to Chloe, who looked like she wanted to ask something. Sensei, is there some sort of award for defeating Veldora-sama? Chloe asked timidly and the other children perked up at her question and quickly turned to me with eager looks in their eyes. Ha. That's a good question. Considering that the final guardian of the whole dungeon is the Storm Dragon himself, there's surely something grand an adventurer would gain after accomplishing an impossible task like that. Gazel remarked half-jokingly. Well, I don't know if you can consider it a reward, but those who manage to clear the entire dungeon will earn the right to officially challenge me in a battle. I answered nonchalantly, and immediately, the guests' eyes widened in shock since they weren't expecting such a reply. What? They yelled in unison. Sigh, am I doing way too surprising things too often? I've lost count of how many times I've shocked guests or new people. Oh well. Most people definitely wouldn't consider that a reward. Hinata remarked apprehensively, and the others nodded in agreement. It's only the right to challenge me. They don't necessarily have to. I added briefly, which eased them a little. But still. Hinata stammered timidly. Foo. Think about it like this. It's more or less impossible for any normal person to completely clear the dungeon in the first place. I imagine it would take someone incredibly powerful and battle-hungry to be even able to come close to achieving it. Assuming they do accomplish the task and considering their nature, they might see the right to challenge Rimu-kun as a reward. Velzard explained concisely. Wow, she came in super clutch for me. That's actually a good point. As expected of Velzard-sama. Elmisia praised genuinely, and Velzard nodded with a smile. Then it would mean that not very many could reach that point. I mean, how many beings are even capable of standing against a true dragon? Errol asked no one in particular. The others seemed to agree with his sentiment. You're right, there are only 2 individuals that I can name off the top of my head. Those would be the Destroyer, Milam Nava, and the Lord of Darkness, Guy Crimson, both of whom are the strongest demon lords. Elmisia enumerated. Ha. Let's not forget Rimuru Dono here. He's already reached that level of power and is likely going to get even stronger, Gazel said in jest. Let's not talk about that, Gazel-san. I replied dismissively, earning me a chuckle from Velzard and a few of the guests. After some more brief discussions regarding the dungeon, I decided to take the guests to the large lobby where we could watch the happenings inside the various floors through several gigantic screens. It wouldn't be long before the first party of adventurers arrived to give the dungeon a test run. Masayuki and his crew, affectionately named Team Lightspeed, are also going to be attempting to brave the dungeon. Yo, Rimuru. Everything's ready and working as intended, Veldora affirmed excitedly through thought communication. The dungeon is now ready to receive its first challengers, Rimuru. Ramirez chimed in excitedly. Excellent work, you guys. I praised genuinely. I'll be staying on the final floor to continue supplying Ramirez and the dungeon with magicules, Veldora said. And I'll be staying in the monitoring room to make sure everything's going smoothly, Ramirez added. All right. We'll be in the lobby observing the challengers, I replied before cutting off the channel. It was now time for the fun to begin. We waited patiently, and after a few minutes, the first few parties of adventurers arrived. I concealed our presence to not attract any attention while we observed the events inside the lower floors. Once the new arrivals had gone through the briefing and short tutorial, they made their way down the steps that led to the second floor where the dungeon truly starts. Whoa! You can really see them in real time entering. Look at the screen, Alice announced excitedly as she pointed at the screen. The guests were in awe at this technology that allowed a live broadcast of the events from a distant location. So cool, the other children exclaimed in unison. Such impressive and advanced technology. From what I can guess, it uses similar mechanisms to a crystal ball that allows for messages to be recorded. Gazel theorized, and his guess isn't too far off if I'm being honest. Eventually, the party I'd been waiting for finally arrived. Turning to the bottom of the steps, I saw Masayuki and his crew with their weapons ready and morale high. Hee. This will be a good opportunity for me to see what Masayuki's skill can really do. I walked over to Velzard and placed my hand on her shoulder. How far do you think Masayuki's party will go, Vels-chan? I asked curiously for her thoughts, and she paused to think for a moment before answering. I'll be generous and say that they'll make it to the beyond the 50th floor. I'm only taking into consideration what I know about his unique skill, which might honestly carry them quite far down, she answered thoughtfully. That is quite a generous estimation. Interesting, although my guess isn't far from yours. I'd say they'll make it to the 40th floor or just before the 50th. I replied with an excited grin. Era, would you like to make this into a bet? She posed a challenge while wearing a cheeky smirk on her face. Ho? Is that a challenge? I asked in provocation. It is indeed. Since both our guesses have the 50th floor as the middle ground, we'll use it to decide the winner. If they don't make it to the 50th floor, then you win. And if they make it past the 50th floor, then I win. She stated in detail and I gladly nodded in agreement. And what would you like the bet to be? I questioned with a raised eyebrow, causing her smirk to grow wider. Foo. The loser has to do whatever the winner demands of them for 3 days. She answered smugly. What the hell? That's it. Small stakes, but I accept. I replied confidently with a wide grin, but her demeanor didn't shift. She suddenly grabbed my chin and looked me right in the eye. However, I remained unwavering and directly stared back at the succubus dragon before me. Era, how bold of you, Rimu-kun. It'll be a pleasure to see that confident smirk get wiped off from your face, she said lustfully. I then put my hand on her waist and gently pulled her towards me. That's my line, Vels-chan. I told her smugly, and we were now making full contact. We remained in this position while continuing to peer directly into each other's eyes. Being in this pose with her is kind of nice. It's like a really intense stare-off, but it's also weirdly hot and romantic at the same time. Her hold on my chin wasn't rough and was quite soft. I felt her waist through the fabric of her kimono as I held on firmly. The sudden urge to do something devious was starting to get to me. Sigh. Time and place. Rimuru-sama. Also, I have a feeling that you'll regret making this bet. Huh? What are you talking about? Rimuru-san, Rimuru dono, sensei?